Welcome back to the Fueling Edge podcast. I'm your host, Diva Volundis, and today I'm excited to be joined by Amy Goodson. Amy is a registered dietitian, certified specialist in sports dietetics, and one of the nation's leading experts in sports nutrition. Throughout her career, she has worked with athletes, from youth and collegiate athletes to professional sports teams, helping them fuel for peak performance, recovery, and long-term health. She is also a best-selling author and a trusted media expert, known for making sports nutrition practical, evidence-based, and easy to understand. In today's episode, we'll be discussing how athletes can fuel for better performance, common nutrition mistakes, hydration, protein and carbohydrate needs, and practical strategies that athletes can use to make their game the next level. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. It's an honor to have you on the Fueling Edge podcast.
Thank you for having me. And honestly, thank you for having the Fueling Edge podcast. I love that you are putting sports nutrition and nutrition for athletes and exercisers at the front of people's minds. Fantastic. So important. So I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you so much. So to kick us off, can you please introduce yourself, your work as a registered dietitian, and what inspired you to pursue sports nutrition and help athletes perform at their best?
100%. So I'm Amy Goodson. I've been a sports dietitian now for 20 years. I like to say I've worked Pee Wee to pro. So I've worked with hundreds, probably thousands now of middle school and high school athletes. And then I spent 10 and a half years working with TCU athletics. I spent 6 years with the Texas Rangers, Major League Baseball team, other minor league teams as well. 4.5 with the Dallas Cowboys. And then I've worked with FC Dallas soccer, PGA Tour players, a variety of Olympic sports. So I worked in the NBA G League, most sports, I would say. And, for me, it's always been about trying to help athletes practically fuel their bodies. It's one thing to know all the science, but if you don't know how to apply it to your everyday life, then what good are we really doing? And so I actually got into sports nutrition from the fitness world. I was a personal trainer and taught group exercise, aka aerobics, when I was in college and graduate school, and just personally had a love for it. I was a dancer growing up and really just was interested in nutrition. And then as I got into my schooling, I really learned to love just the sports aspect of it. And very fortunately got a sports nutrition job right when I got out of graduate school and was able to work there for 11 years. And so now I have my own business, the Sports Nutrition Playbook, where we work with athletes one-on-one to help fuel their bodies, give them practical routines, et cetera. And then I actually also have a business for dietitians to help them get the education and coaching to become a sports dietitian. So all about fueling athletes and trying to make it as easy and accessible and real life as possible.
That's great. And I'm sure that a lot of athletes appreciate your help. It's definitely a big part of, just because the sports principles, you have to know how to apply them to athletes, or else it won't work. So that's a cool thing.
Yes.
And also your personal trainer aspect, that's really cool because I also love fitness, exercising. So it's great that you also had that in your realm of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
So after working with athletes at different levels, from young athletes to professionals, what is the biggest nutrition mistake you see athletes making that holds them back from reaching their potential?
Biggest mistake is they don't prioritize their nutrition. They think, I'll be fine. I feel fine. Like, fine. I don't know how many times I've had an athlete tell me they feel fine. And the problem there is when you're not optimizing and really intentionally putting a focus on your nutrition, you are fine. I'm going to argue you could be better. And you could be really focusing on optimal performance. And so I find that at all levels, athletes focus on the next practice. They focus on the weight room. They focus on their specialty coach, whether it's a hitting coach or a shooting coach or a quarterback coach or whatever it is. And the number one thing that gives their body energy to do all of the things is the thing they neglect the most. And so I would say that's the number one miss, Pee Wee to pro. There's athletes that pay attention to it, but the majority of them are not. And so a lot of athletes are just surviving through their workouts and their training sessions when they could be thriving if they were really focusing on proper nutrition.
Yeah, it's so true because I know a lot of athletes that just think, feeling tired or sluggish after a game or before a game is just normal. But nutrition ties so much to that part of, fueling yourself before a game and recovering properly after a game.
Yes.
So nutrition is definitely a big part about being an athlete.
Yes.
And a lot of athletes think that they're just eating well because they choose healthy foods, but they may still not be properly fueling their bodies for their energy needs. What is the difference between eating healthy and eating for athletic performance?
So we talk about eating for athletic performance. I kind of want you to think of like three different things. So first, you need to be eating often. Like fueling consistently is really going to be a key. You can't just go, oh, like I get enough nutrition in during the day. The timing and nutrient distribution is going to be key because we know that your energy levels and your focus levels follow your blood sugar levels. So if your blood sugar is crashing because you haven't eaten over the course of the day, your energy is probably going to crash. You're not going to be as focused. So the first thing really is trying to dial in on eating often to optimize athletic performance. The second thing, it's not just about like, oh, I eat healthy foods. What are you eating when I'm telling you to eat all of these meals and snacks? So we want athletes to consume high fiber carbohydrates and protein with some healthy fat, obviously, at all of the meals and snacks consistently over the course of the day. Again, the carb protein combination, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, is going to be what really helps stabilize that blood sugar. And so it's not enough to be like, oh, I had a fruit or oh, I had a vegetable. I need you eating carbs and protein because that's going to be what really helps maximize your energy levels, as well as what's helping your body build and repair consistently over the course of the day. Because when I'm giving your body adequate protein, I'm giving it the little building blocks that it needs to build and recover throughout the day, not just, post workout. And then the third thing I would say to really optimize athletic performance is it's about hydration. So we know that just a 2% level of dehydration in the body equates to about a 10% decrease in performance. And so lots of athletes will say, oh, I'm just going to drink some water during the day. They're not really paying attention to it. Water is healthy, but I'm going to tell you, I need athletes paying attention to their fluid intake, their electrolyte intake, and really oftentimes for athletic performance, trying to maximize fueling with fluid. So that might mean making your fluid a sports drink if it's around practice. Maybe that's putting electrolytes in your water if it's throughout the day. It could potentially be drinking a milk, chocolate milk, smoothie, ways that I can get additional carbohydrate, protein, electrolytes, and nutrients. So when we talk about athletic performance, I'm all about like what you're eating, when you're eating it, when you're hydrating, because the strategy behind planning your nutrition over the course of the day is what helps optimize both your energy levels and then also your performance levels.
That was greatly said. And you touch upon like the macronutrients like carbohydrates and protein.
Mm-hmm.
How important are micronutrients for athletes?
Okay, so glad you asked this question. So, micronutrients, think vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all of these things. So many athletes are like, fruits, vegetables, it's not that big of a deal, like whatever. This is the way I like to describe micronutrients to athletes. Think about going to a big concert or a big sporting event. So, you don't see all the people working behind the scenes, right? You don't see the people running the sound. You don't see the people running the lights. You may not see the people picking up the trash, but if they weren't there, the whole show would fall apart. That is what vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, all the micronutrients do in your body. They're the behind the scenes crew. They're going in, they're helping recover. They're, being little cofactors to other nutrients. They're helping your body build collagen, build muscle, all the different things. They're helping digest food. So they're the little guys running the show in the back that you're not paying attention to. If they're not there adequately, bad things happen. So one of the key things that I try to tell athletes is eat color, fruits and vegetables. So you get micronutrients in all of your nutrient-rich foods, but fruits and vegetables, each color really packs a different nutrient package. So like I'm going to get anthocyanins and really strong antioxidants in my like red and purpley colored fruits. I'm usually going to get vitamin C and iron in my dark green vegetables. I'm going to get beta carotene in my orangey yellow vegetables and fruits. So really trying to eat the colors of the rainbow sounds so basic, so important. That's going to be what helps the behind the scenes crew do what they need to do to keep your body strong.
That's a great analogy for micronutrients. That definitely made me understand it much better than I
Mhm.
usually had. And about carbohydrates,
Mhm.
which you touched on a little before, so they're
Yeah,
often misunderstood and sometimes avoided by athletes because, some athletes think that they gain weight from carbohydrates. Why are carbohydrates so important for
yeah.
performance, and what happens when athletes do not consume enough of them?
Carbohydrates are really your body's number one source of energy. Your body uses them very quickly. So the body can use carbohydrates, break it down to glucose, which is sugar, that goes straight into your muscle cells for energy. So when we specifically talk about it around exercise, the higher the intensity the exercise, the more carbohydrate your body relies on as a source of energy. So if you're moving a little slower, you're usually blending or burning a blend of carbohydrates and fats. As you start to work more intensely, think running faster, jumping higher, lifting heavier. In those scenarios, you're actually burning more carbohydrate as a source of energy, which means you have to fuel your body with carbohydrates. Athletes that don't fuel with carbohydrates oftentimes end up feeling pretty fatigued. They may feel like I just can't run as fast. I just can't lift as heavy. And oftentimes it's because they don't have enough carbohydrate. Now, in the world of carbohydrates, you have really nutrient rich carbohydrates and some that are a little more processed and maybe not quite as beneficial for the body. So let's talk in the morning. Oatmeal, super oats, like, oh my gosh, you've got fiber, you've got B vitamins, you've got all the good nutrients. Pop-Tart, processed flour, sugar, very low in nutrients. Both are a carb. One, I'm getting a lot more bang for my buck. Let's talk about, at a lunchtime, if you're talking about like I'm having a sandwich on whole grain bread, or maybe I have whole grain crackers or something like that. And then over here, you've got fried chicken skin. Okay, well, you know what I mean? Like we've got flour fried on chicken skin. Yeah, both are carbohydrates. One's better for you, right? So, as an athlete, your goal is to try to choose the most nutrient rich versions as you can. So, typically, those are going to be like whole grains. Whole grains are going to give you more fiber. Fiber does slow down digestion a little bit, so it helps you feel a little bit fuller longer. And then you're going to get other nutrients, specifically B vitamins, iron, folic acid. Those are all what the micronutrients that you'll find in those high fiber carbohydrates. So your goal is to get a carbohydrate on your plate at each meal and snack. When you pair a carbohydrate with protein, I mentioned this a minute ago, but you balance your energy levels, you balance your focus levels, you balance your blood sugar levels, and that will often help you from craving the sugar or more processed carbohydrates. So athletes that typically skip carbs or don't really do a good job of carbs and protein together, they end up craving those more processed carbohydrates. So choosing the best choice, putting an appropriate amount on your plate is really going to be what gives your body the energy that it needs to perform. And then obviously refueling with carbohydrate to replenish what was burned off.
Yeah, definitely. Because I used to think, only protein was the macronutrient you need most as an athlete, to repair
Mm-hmm.
muscles or like refuel before a
Yeah.
game. But I don't, and now I realize how important carbohydrates are for athletes, especially because they're expending so much energy and they need that extra fuel source. How you touched up on so many athletes, eating Pop Tarts, for example, instead of a whole food carbohydrate source. And that kind of leads
Yeah,
me into the next point
exactly.
of like, conveniently, what can you eat? Because I know a lot of athletes, maybe they have other things on their schedule, and then it's not as convenient to eat a whole food source. So, can you walk us through what an
Yep.
ideal fueling strategy looks like for an athlete on game day, in the hours before competition, during the event, and after for recovery?
So I want you to remember the 5 P's. Proper planning prevents poor performance. We'll say it again. Proper planning prevents poor performance. So when we talk about nutrition from a fueling strategy on a game day or a competition day or a race day, you got to plan a little bit in advance. So I often tell athletes to create a fuel schedule, just like they would create their game day schedule for school or for warming up or all the different things. So looking in advance is going to be key. So where can I eat breakfast? Where's my lunch? Where are my snacks? So planning it out in advance, just like you take your shoes and your socks, just like you would take your books if you had a test today at school, really trying to focus on planning in advance. The goal is going to be, like I said, you want to eat often, but let's say you have a nighttime game. Let's use that as an example, pretty common for a lot of athletes. You'd want to get up and eat breakfast, carb, protein, color, fluid, eat breakfast. Depending on where lunch is, if you have like a normal 11, 12 a.m. lunch, you could probably go straight to lunch. But then when we start, if it's a later lunch, you could obviously do a snack. But then thinking through that nighttime game, typically if a game is at 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30 at night, our pregame meal would be about 3 to 4 hours before that, so that we give your body plenty of time to eat, let it digest, and then give you energy. So typically around 3:30 or 4, you'd probably have a pregame meal, making about half your plate carbohydrate, a fourth of it protein, a fourth of it easy to digest fruits and vegetables, and then at least 16 to 20 ounces of fluid. So that's kind of your pre-game plate. And then typically what athletes are doing, they're changing clothes, they're getting to practice, they're getting to the game, then they start warming up, which means you start burning energy. So that means right before that game or that competition, we want you to get some version of a carbohydrate. Maybe that's like a banana or a granola bar or part of a bagel or something like that. If you really feel hungry, could be peanut butter crackers or a protein bar or a PB&J. Then hydrating through your game is going to be key. If you have a halftime or a break, get some carbs, applesauce, pretzels, fruit, sports drink, going to be ideal. Continue hydrating. And then post-game, post-competition, consuming nutrition as soon as possible. So if you can get a snack like a chocolate milk, a smoothie, or a protein bar with at least 16 to 24 ounces of fluid, that's going to be ideal. And then getting to a meal, even if it's late, 10 o'clock, 10:30, you still have to eat. And you want to go refuel with the same shape of the plate that I said a minute ago, about half carbohydrate, fourth protein, fourth color, plenty of fluid to optimally help your body refuel before going to bed.
That was awesomely said. I know a lot of athletes who, they only think about what to eat before, but also the post recovery is just as important because if you don't recover yourself after
Huge.
games
Yes.
or practices or just long training sessions in general, you're not going to have any adaptations to what you just did. And you also like mentioned hydration,
Exactly.
and I think a lot of athletes see that as like a side thing. They push it away. They don't focus on it as much as nutrition. So, and since hydration and
Yep.
recovery are two areas athletes often overlook, what are the biggest mistakes you see athletes make when it comes to hydration and in general post training recovery nutrition?
So hydration, kind of what you said, they just don't pay attention to it. They drink when they're thirsty. They're not being intentional about it. And one of the challenges is for most athletes, like if you're training multiple times a day, you're sweating a lot, like you have got to stay on top of your hydration. And I mentioned this statistic a minute ago, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important that just a 2% level of dehydration in the body can equate to a 10% decrease in performance. As dehydration gets worse, performance declines. And that means if you show up to a workout, a game, a weightlifting session dehydrated, you are already subpar. So your teammate, your opponent that did hydrate, they're ahead of the game. So you really have to have a hydration strategy to make sure you are hydrating consistently. I had a coach that he was now the head baseball coach at UT, but he was with me at TCU for 10 years. And he used to always say, there's a lot of things you can't control in sport. You can control what you eat and what you drink. Why wouldn't you control what you can control? Hydration is one that you can control. So drinking consistently, one of my biggest rule of thumbs for athletes is monitor your hydration by looking at the color of your urine. It's easy, it requires nobody's help, and it costs no money. It's free. That makes it a great test. So looking at your urine throughout the daytime, your goal is for it to be pale yellow to clear. If it is apple juice and darker, bad news. You need to quickly find some fluid. You're going to be more dehydrated when you wake up in the morning. So if you train in the morning, really got to focus on your fluid. You're going to be more dehydrated when you train twice a day. Many athletes, like this time of year in the August and September timeframe, they might be training twice a day. So you need to make sure that you are hydrating consistently. Gonna be likely to be dehydrated when it's hot and humid outside. Another thing that's going on this time of year. So really trying to stay on top of that hydration. Dehydration can lead to fatigue, nauseousness, headache, lightheadedness, and then extreme muscle cramping, like just really severe tiredness. Can also lead to heat stroke, heat illness. So do what you can to intentionally hydrate. Bring that water bottle with electrolytes. Have your sports drink at practice. And then, like I said, if you don't feel hungry throughout the day, fueling with fluid, milk, chocolate milk, smoothies that have carbohydrate and protein shakes, optimal ways to both hydrate and get your carbs and protein.
Yeah, that was greatly said. And especially for like athletes who wake up in the morning and yeah, like you said, they have a practice or a game in the morning. How important is it
Yeah.
to consume like water or just hydration in general in the morning after you've been sleeping for a long time without any hydration?
Essential, right? Because you wake up dehydrated. And here's the other thing. I said a 2% level causes a decrease in performance. We know that a 1% level causes cognitive decline. So that's mental sharpness. So think if you're going to school or you're going to work or wherever you're going in the morning, if you're dehydrated mentally, it oftentimes can be harder to stay focused, to stay sharp. So you need to make sure you are drinking, whether you practice in the morning or not. If you practice in the morning, for sure. I always tell athletes, like, get a plan in place. Have that water bottle, whatever sports drink ready to go. Get up, drink a few sips. You have to change clothes. Drink some sips while you're changing. You clearly have to walk, drive, or bike to your workout. Drink some sips when you get there. There's probably a warm up. Drink some sips of fluid. So again, you have to be intentional about it, right? You got to think about it. And just, my mom always says, people prioritize what's important to them. If it's important to you to be your best at your sport, you got to start putting some small things in place. I like to teach athletes to habit stack. So it's like when I put on my shoes, I make sure I'm drinking my water. When I grab my bag, I make sure my water bottle. So think about things you're already doing and how can you tell yourself, okay, I need to make sure that I'm hydrating when I do that activity. And it can help build the habit so that you're staying more hydrated more often.
Yeah, that habit stacking part is very good for, athletes keeping it on their mind, not
Yes.
just forgetting. If you pair habits like that, it's much more easier to stay in the brain for
Yes.
sure.
And
And
athletes are
you
good at habits. Like they're used to habits. So, just learning to build your fuel and hydration schedule on top of habits that you already do can help you get better at making nutrition and hydration a habit.
definitely. And you've worked with elite athletes and organizations. What is one nutrition habit or mindset you
Mhm.
notice among high level athletes that you wish more young athletes would adopt?
So it's interesting because at the high levels of sport, some of them are really good at nutrition and some of them are not really great at nutrition. So I'm going to tell you the ones that excel and often stay longer in the game. That's a big piece of the equation are the ones that are intentional. They're paying attention to their nutrition. Like they're just thinking about it. Like I know that sounds a little bit silly as like, what's the key thing? Thinking about it. Like I get the nutrition's hard. You have to eat and drink all day. But athletes that really focus and make it just as important of a piece of their schedule as their training, their weight room, their video watching, they're the ones that tend to excel. Oftentimes the ones that aren't paying attention, they're the ones that fatigue faster. They're the ones that have muscle cramps. They're the ones that get injured more. Often the ones that don't stay in the game long. You look at some of, like the big, like big time athletes. Tom Brady, obsessed with nutrition. LeBron James, obsessed with nutrition. Like, you start looking at some of these big, one of my favorites is Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis played as a linebacker in the NFL till he was 37 years old. That is a long time. And he was really focused on his nutrition. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite quotes that I heard him say at one point in time. He said, all these rookies come in eating their McDonald's and their chips and their sodas, and they think they'll beat me. He said, they can't. Their fuel won't let them. Boom, Ray. Yes. He was like, your fuel, what you're putting in your body, won't let you beat me. And so I think that that's important to remember. When everyone else is just going with normal and fine, if you will intentionally fuel, it will set you apart from the others.
Yeah, for sure. And then there comes a line where, like, if you really want to elevate your performance to the next level, putting nutrition as on the same level as your overall just training and workouts and all of that, that's how you take your performance to the next level for sure.
Hmm.
And what is one sports nutrition myth or misconception that you wish would disappear because it definitely negatively affects athletes?
It sounds basic, but it's that like, I'm fine. I kind of said this earlier, like, I'm fine. I said this at the beginning as like one of the biggest problems. I think the biggest is that like athletes are great at their sport because they're good at their actual sport. And it really boils down to fueling their bodies well. And I think there's such a misconception that if I'm a good athlete, I don't really have to pay attention to my nutrition. Like, I'm fine, I'm good without it. And I'm just always arguing, you might be better. You're surviving, but could you thrive? And, a funny story I just told it the other day when I worked in the NFL. I had this guy who's a defensive back, 23 years old. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to like start eating good in like 2 years. I was, oh, 2 years, right? When you're 25. And I was like, oh, what's your favorite car? Boys love sports cars. Tells me his favorite car. And I said, cool, would you go get that car today and then just beat the heck out of it for the next 2 years, put off-brand oil in it, cheap gas, and then all of a sudden in 2 years start taking care of it? And he looked at me and he goes, oh, that's really something to think about. You wouldn't do it to a car. You wouldn't do it to an iPhone. Why would you do it to your body? And so I think athletes have to get out of the mindset of I'm a good athlete and I'm fine, and try to figure out, how could I be better? How could I fuel to have more energy? A lot of athletes just like not feeling great is normal, and they have no concept that they could actually feel better. And so I think it sounds silly, but I really think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. The better the athlete, the more often you see that misconception.
Yeah, and that analogy with the phone and car, that's definitely one to think about because after all, your body is your temple, one of the most important things in your life, if not
Exactly.
the most. So if you're not taking care of it, then you're
Hmm.
kind of just praying for your downfall, especially in athletics and sports.
Exactly.
And to end us off, if you could give every young athlete listening three simple nutrition habits they could start implementing today to improve their performance, what would they be?
Number one, create a fuel schedule. Get your nutrition in your daily routine. So, create a fuel schedule, look at your school schedule, your practice schedule, your game schedule, look at all the things and schedule your nutrition around it. Where can I eat breakfast? Where can I eat lunch? Where do I eat snacks? Especially for like young athletes that are either in middle school or high school or even in college, your schedule might look different. You might have a block schedule. If you're in college, you might have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, and then a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So looking at that schedule is key. And then actually putting your reminders on your phone so that it can beep at you, or your watch or something, so that it beeps, vibrates at you, like fuel your body, hydrate. And then if you don't have time to grab a snack right then, guess what? You can hit snooze and it will come back to you. But that is an easy way to go, okay, well, like school starts at, I don't know, just like 8:30 in the morning. I can eat at 7:30 in the morning. Make it a recurring event every day at 7:30. I'm eating breakfast. Simple strategy, but can have a really big impact on making nutrition a part of your day. Second thing is carb protein. Carb protein, carb protein, carb protein. You want to make sure and have carbohydrate and protein at each of your meals and snacks. Carbohydrate, quick energy. Protein slows down digestion. When you pair them together, you get very stable energy, very stable focus. So that might look like scrambled eggs and toast, chicken and rice, steak and a potato, crackers, cheese, yogurt, fruit. Those combinations are key. So you want to make sure that you are having a fuel schedule, carb protein, every meal and snack. Third thing, we just harped on it, hydration. This is an area most athletes miss out on. So figure out what's your reusable water bottle that you're bringing with you. Where are the water fountains at school? Where can you go refill that fluid throughout the daytime? So carrying a bottle with you will help you like hydrate consistently. If you don't have one with you at school or at practice, Where are you going to get your hydration from? You're not. So trying to focus on like bringing it with you is going to be key. I'm going to go back to my 5 P's, right? Proper planning prevents poor performance. So if I create a fit fuel schedule, I start to plan my meals, carb, protein. Even if I'm on the go, you can do it at Chick-fil-A, grilled chicken nuggets and a yogurt fruit cup. You could do it at the local 7-Eleven, beef jerky stick, granola bar. You can do it in your kitchen. It can be done. Now, all those places have other options as well, but it can be done. And then the third thing is that hydration. So proper planning is going to help you prevent fatigue, prevent muscle cramping, prevent all of those things. If you will fuel schedule, carb, protein at all the meals and snacks, hydration, you'd be surprised how much better you'll feel and how much better you'll perform.
That is great advice. And I'm sure any athletes watching this will definitely relate to that and definitely use that in their training, and they'll just see their performance skyrocket for sure.
Yes.
So, Amy, would you like to talk about your fueling and your program?
I would love to. So, in my business, the Sports Nutrition Playbook, we actually work one-on-one with athletes virtually in every state to help fuel their bodies. So, we do one-on-one sports nutrition coaching covered by medical insurance. So, this is key because lots of people don't realize that their medical insurance covers nutrition counseling. So if you have any of the big plans, Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and if you're an athlete listening, ask your parent, or any of their third-party groups, it is highly likely that your nutrition is covered by your medical insurance. So the statistic is that 94% of people can see a registered dietitian for free on commercial medical insurance. So we would love to help you fuel your bodies. No better way to get a fuel schedule down than to have a sports dietitian help you. So get out your phone or a pencil and write this down. So if you text the word insurance to our phone number, 878-877-6787, you will be sent the link. So I'm going to say it again. Text the word insurance to 878-877-6787. We will text you the link and you can complete it. You will need your medical insurance card to snap a picture of it. So ask your parent for that. But there are many athletes that have unlimited free visits with a sports dietitian. So this is your chance to take advantage of someone really helping you and coaching you, just like you would have a sport coach. Having a nutrition coach could be helpful. And then you can also visit our website, thesportsnutritionplaybook.com. We have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. We have an Instagram. I have the Sports Nutrition Playbook flip book that you can purchase. All ways to really help you fuel your body. And the majority of them, except for my book, are free. So do your part to learn about sports nutrition, get the practical tips, and then put them into action. And I can pretty much promise you, you will see a difference.
That's awesome. And I'll definitely make sure to put that into the description of this podcast episode in the video, just so any athletes watching this, they can definitely go check it out.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
So, Amy Goodson, thank you so much for joining me today on the Fueling Edge podcast. It was great talking with you about sports nutrition, carbohydrates and proteins, hydration, and other topics in that realm. And I'm sure a lot of athletes watching this podcast have learned a lot of valuable content from you. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me.